10 ancient mass graves we've only recently found. Mass graves are the historical remnants of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people buried together due to casualties of war, large-scale famine, diseases, or weird rituals. Olympic mass grave. Construction of a relief road for the 2012 London Olympics in 2009 led to the discovery of an ancient mass grave in Weymouth, England. Several questions arose regarding the same, and finally, after examining their teeth, it was discovered that they were not of ancient Britons and Saxons, but Scandinavian Vikings who ought to have been killed and buried between AD 910 to 1030. They had sword marks on their jaws and upper spines, and before burying, their heads were cut off and placed beside their bodies, which is a clear indication that they were war captives. Out of the 51 bodies found in the grave, 10 of them were between their teens and early 20s. Also, the absence of jewels, weapons, and clothing indicated that they were buried naked. Infant mass graves. The outlandish infanticide tradition of the Roman Empire was famous, and that was attributed to the reason that there were little food for the family, or prostitute mothers had to prevent interruptions with their work. A mass grave of 97 babies was found in 1912 in Buckinghamshire, England, by Alfred H. Cox. Things took a new turn when Dr. Jill Ayers saw the remains packed in a cigarette case in a museum in 2008 and examined it. The results indicated that they were buried between AD 150 and AD 200. Dr. Dyer suggested that these babies would have been buried in brothels by prostitutes, though later he doubted if they killed only male infants and saved the female infants for business. Nevertheless, the sex ratio in the grave was almost equal. Paris mass grave. Something weird was discovered when archaeologists were called to examine the cellar of a Monoprix store in Paris, which was to be converted into extra storage space. 8 graves were found at the site, with most of them having up to 20 bodies, and one had over 150. Actually, the store was standing on an ancient site named Hôpital de la Trinité, which operated between the 12th and 17th centuries. The bodies were buried at the same time, indicating the graves must be a result of the epidemic, the plague, that occurred in Paris between the 14th and 16th centuries. The mass graves of Cambridge. A mass grave was discovered underneath St John's College at the University of Cambridge and is said to contain 1,300 remains. The grave under Old Divinity School at St John's College is said to have been dug between the 13th and 15th century. The site was in fact an ancient hospital burial ground. The hospital was run by monks for the diseased poor, excluding the homeless with lepers and pregnant women. It's believed that most of the bodies are of dead patients. Uffizi Gallery mass grave. A 1,500-year-old mass grave was discovered in Florence in 2014 underneath the Uffizi Gallery. Over 60 bodies with coins dating back to the 4th and 5th centuries were found. There were no signs of injuries, burns, or scars, which indicated the death must have been due to an early epidemic, like the Black Death. Another indication for the same is that they were all buried at the same time. Archaeologists say that continued digging will show the way to hundreds, if not thousands, of bodies. Mass grave of Towton. The Battle of Towton is possibly the bloodiest battle ever fought in Britain. The battle was between the House of Lancaster and the House of York, which resulted in the death of about 28,000 men. a mass grave was found by some builders in 1996 at the Toten Hall, which was a mile away from the ancient battle area. Out of the 40 skeletons found, 28 were still in good shape and they bore intense signs of violence. The clothes of the dead soldiers had been removed before they were buried. Carbon dating proved they died around the time of the Toten battle, and hence they are most likely to be dead soldiers of the war. Visby mass graves. The Danish king, Valdemar IV, invaded Gotland Island in 1361, and a group of peasants resisted it, but ended up being victims of a massive manslaughter. Archaeologist Oscar Wernersten discovered a grave with 300 bodies in 1905 outside Visby's city wall in Sweden. Again, a total of 1,185 bodies were found from a site nearby the earlier one by Swedish archaeologist Bengt Thordman and Paul Norland. While most of the bodies were randomly thrown in 20 bodies, they were arranged neatly in the grave. Also, soldiers were buried with their armour on. Mayan mass graves. While researching the water system of an ancient city named Zuxor, archaeologist Nicolaus Seelfield discovered a mass grave in an artificial cave in a historical Mayan city. Before the Mayans were buried, the grave was a water reservoir, and artifacts found from the cave suggests that it was built in the 7th century. 4 corpses were found, with 2 of them being females in the age group of 18 to 42. Results showed the victims were butchered and beheaded before they were buried. All-female Chinese mass grave. About 80 skulls were found by archaeologists in the Shimia ruin, which is the largest ancient city in China, and all of them being that of young women. It is believed that they have been used as human sacrifices, and their skulls might have been used in building the ancient city's walls. The women might have been captured as enemies or prisoners and killed in large-scale violence. Also, there are about 100 murals. Similar case was seen when archaeologists from Henan province found an altar along with a skeleton. The Forgotten Army mass graves. Numerous graves with bodies of 113 men were discovered outside the city of Yorkshire, England in 2008. It's believed that the bodies are that of soldiers who fought for the parliamentarians during the English Civil War. They had participated in the 1644 siege of York, where they died of disease, mostly typhus fever. The skeletons were well arranged in rows with their faces lying down or on their sides. Almost 87 of them were males, between the age groups 35 and 49. 1030. They had sword marks on their jaws and upper spines, and before burying, their heads were cut off and placed beside their bodies, which is a clear indication that they were war captives. Out of the 51 bodies arose regarding the same, and finally, after examining their teeth, it was discovered that they were not of ancient Britons and Saxons, but Scandinavian Vikings, who ought to have been killed and buried between AD 910 to 10 ancient mass graves we've only recently found. Mass graves are the historical remnants of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people buried together due to casualties of war, large-scale famine, diseases found in the grave. 10 of them were between their teens and early 20s. Also, the absence of jewels, weapons, and clothing indicated that they were buried naked. Infant mass graves. The outers or weird rituals. Olympic mass grave. Construction of a relief road for the 2012 London Olympics in 2009 led to the discovery of an ancient mass grave in Weymouth, England. Several questions